Yeah, I only got a Switch one time in my whole life. That was by my grandmother, and I discovered the principle that you know, uh, um, if you let's see, she said, "Well, go get you a Switch." I thought I was being smart. I found one that was flimsy that that would break or something, wouldn't do much. So I'm like, yeah, that's a good one. And she looked at it and she said, uh-uh. And then she went outside with me and she said, "Get that one." I'm like, "Oh, I don't think I like that one." But needless to say, I forget even what I did, but I didn't ever do it again.
I got one about that big around.
Yeah,
What?
yeah,
I don't know, about 6 8 foot
yeah,
long. Oh, I'm gonna be smart.
yeah.
You
That's what I
won't
thought.
you won't be you won't look at that.
Yeah.
Tell you what, you wore that thing out.
Oh, did you?
And
Well,
throw that at me.
well, like I say, my my grandmother, she made me get a different one because that one wasn't going to be good for her. So she,
Dad, he never did use a switch. He used a crazy strap. You know what that is?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I tell you what, you come off forward right like that. Never hit.
Well, of course, different times,
Gets
obviously.
you by the hand,
Yeah.
hold you. You go around the circle.
Kids probably know the numbers to DHS now, Child Protective Services now, where if you beat them too much, they probably call. But so when I was a kid, you did something wrong. Say you did something wrong, and your dad's at work and your mom's there. Of course, she would give you a whooping, and then your dad, when he came on, he'd give you one too. So you got two for the price of one, as I say. But my mom is always embarrassing because so you know she'd say, "Take your belt off." You knew that wasn't good, but she would whoop you with your own belt, which seemed to. But my dad hit much harder. Okay, but I'd rather get from my dad than my mom. So my dad would be like wham, and then wham. Depending on how many it was, what you did, how many it deserved. But it was consistent and it was just hard. Well, my mom had a bad aim, and so my mom, she had your belt, and she would just be talking. Like, why are you making me do this and all this type of stuff? And the whole time she's kind of waving that belt, and then she would kind of do a false one, and then wham, right on your back. She wasn't aiming for the back, but that's where she hit. And then she'd start talking again, and and trying to get that aim right. She'd miss again, right on the back of your hamstrings. It's like you never knew when it was going to happen because she would be talking and everything, and you never knew where it was going to hit either. So something in the lower back hurts more than on your bottom or even on your legs. That stings a little bit more, and so like I said, she just and then she'd forget count. I'd say, "Oh, that was two," and she said, "No, I'm gonna start." So, uh, needless to say, it was it was adventure. I told one time the story. I hadn't told it in a while, but so my mom was on the phone and I needed something. I don't remember what it was. Maybe I was hungry, whatever. But she was talking to somebody, and I kept pestering her. I wanted her off the phone, and she gets off the phone. And of course, my mom, a Southern lady, she had a phone voice. Well, hello. She could be yelling at somebody and then say, "Oh, Bradshaw residence," just as soft and sweet as it could be. And so she was just still talking, sweet. And then as soon as she got the phone, I could just see in her eyes, it was just different. She metamorphed into a something else, and she was angry, steam coming out of her ears and everything. And I knew I was going to get, whooping and everything. And I'm thinking, I'm sizing her up. I guess I was about 6 or 7. I'm sizing her up. I'm like, she's old, much younger than I am now, but she's old. And here I am. I'm not too slow. I believe I can. I don't believe she can catch me if I take off running. And so, as soon as I thought I took off, in the house. it was that little house, wasn't many rooms. I don't know what I was thinking, but needless to say, a motivated mom is much faster than you think. And so she cornered me in my own bedroom, and there was two small, twin beds in there, and so once again, I'd made a bad decision. So the whatever it might have been, just a light spanking, now was going to be a whooping, and I'm like, this ain't good. And look in the bed, it was maybe that tall, off the ground. I'm thinking, I can get under there, and she can't. And so I slid right under there. I'm thinking, I'll wait here for day, 2 month, year, whatever it takes until she's not mad. And that's where she did something that surprised me. So she didn't give up. She couldn't get under it. I was correct there, but she got on top of the bed and started jumping up and down. And I'm seeing this like, I'm like, it's gonna fall. I'm gonna die. And I'm like, whatever she does to me, she's not gonna kill me. And so I come right out, and took my punishment. But you know, I told that in places where she was in attendance, and she'd just be like, you don't say that. But anyway, needless to say, you can't avoid punishment. Is the bottom line there? If you got punishment coming, your best thing is to take it and learn from it and not trying to hide from
When you run off, you got to come back.
it. Some point you do, yeah.
And
Well,
not coming back is the wrong thing to do.
well, like I said, that I thought I could wait her out, that she'd forget about it, and that don't
Think
work.
they forgot about
But
it.
she was hot enough that she got on that bed, started jumping. I could see that spring just coming down, and I'm like, "Ooh, this isn't good."
And it's something like this, you think you forgot about it.
Yeah, no, they
And
don't
boy,
forget.
you think be just fine, and then all of a sudden grab you by the
Yeah,
shirt collar, and she already had that switch.
yeah,
I call it club.
yeah.
She called it switch. Once she get through, you couldn't sit down for no while.
Well, my mom didn't. She didn't go for the shirt collar. She
You
went
know
for
what a stick stove it is?
yeah.
I had that years ago.
Oh, ouch! That a little aggressive.
My mother was
Yeah.
something else.
Well, but like I say, different times. A lot of people hear that day and they're like, "Oh, that's bad." I'm like, "No, it's." But my mom wouldn't go for the shirt collar. She went for the ear.
Mm.
Yeah, and I've learned from that where your ear goes, your body's going to want to follow. You know, especially a little twist and everything, you go right along with it. Uh, and so that's what my mom did. She'd grab that ear. Of course, she had a little bit long nails, so it'd dig into it too.
The
And
only time I get to stay at home is chopping cotton or picking cotton. The rest of the time I went with my friend.
hmm
We called him Big Bill Smith. And we get, we had to change the irrigation pipes and stuff like that, and got the grass out of the soybeans and careless weeds and stuff like that. But I didn't get beat down there. We had a mom and them that couldn't drive. Mom or dad, either one, didn't drive. They went and bought a station wagon and let Johnny have it. He's 2 year older than I was. Well, he drove everything and greased it or anything like that, checking it out. One day, well, one night, he went up my friend's daddy, Jack Smith. He said, Jack, I need your help. You know what you got? He said, my car broke down the road. That front end it got tired and just like that. Damn middle of the road. We took the tractor and trailer down there and hooked it up, guys up on the trailer, covered the jack out. And John and I went home. Mom's in bed. I didn't hear y'all come in. We walked in there. Mom, where's your car at? Down Jack Smith. what you doing down there? What's on the trailer? It fell in. Johnny wouldn't say a word. I was done all the talk. And I got the thrasher. The Jack Smith, it fell in hard in the middle of the highway. Jack brought a trailer and stuff that we loaded up. So how bad is it? You have to have the over undercarriage. It did. It was like a frog out there.
Well, let's get going with our Bible study. Second Chronicles, actually chapter 20, the end of it, verse 31. We've been dealing with Israel for a long time. You know, we dealt with Elijah, Elisha, we had Ahab and other things, and there's other things going on concurrently, but it's hard sometimes to, if you look at the chronological, it gets a little jumbled and you kind of lose track. So I chose to wait till a good stopping point in the Israel stuff to go back. So this overlaps some of the things we've talked about, but not too much. So Second Chronicles chapter 20 and verse 31, we're going to deal with, we talked about Jehoshaphat way back when, but I want to just refresh the very end. We may have read this, but in order to set up the king that we're going to talk about for a little while, we needed to go back and see this. And so we see in verse 31, thus Jehoshaphat reigned over Judah. And, we're in the divided kingdom. Remember that Judah had some good kings. They had bad kings as well. And what you notice especially about Judah is when they have good kings, things generally go better. Peace and other things. But so they had a good king in Jehoshaphat. It said, thus Jehoshaphat reigned over Judah. He was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shilhi. He says he walked in the way of Asa, his father, and Asa was a good king as well, and did not turn aside from it, doing what was right in the sight of the Lord. However, it says in verse 33, the high places. Now, what's significant by the high places? What was done in the high places? Idol worship, yes. And why do you think they used high places? Even in Greek mythology, uh, those false gods, the Greeks, where did they? What was that? Mount Olympus. So even there, it was a high place. By the way, Mount Olympus is a real mountain, and so that's what they would say. That's where the gods were. Uh, so obviously, higher the place, the closer, in a simple mind, you are to, your deity. But fact is, that's not the case. The true God is everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're on Mount Magazine or down here in the valley. It doesn't matter. God is there everywhere. So, but you can understand that's of a simple mindset that didn't believe in the real God of what they would think. So it says the high places, however, were not taken away. The people had not yet set their hearts upon God of their fathers. So, although uh, Jehoshaphat was a godly man, as far as we can tell, and by the way, Chronicles it lets you know if it's there's flaws to a person, but for the kings of Judah. But the fact is that the whole population was not like that. Uh, they had not continued to follow God as they should. And verse 34 says, now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, from first to last, are written in the chronicles of Jehu, the son of Hananiah, uh, which are recorded in the books of the King of Kings of Israel. Now, to my knowledge, none of these type chronicles or books have ever been found. They could one day. If they are, that's fine. That'd be great historical information. Uh, Generally, what books are found that are history during this time, all they do is confirm what Scripture has said. But it's just pointing out that's where they were. Now, at the time that the person recorded Chronicles, a lot of times people think that Ezra is the one that wrote the book of Chronicles, first and second, as we have it divided. But We don't really know. But if he is the one who wrote it, so during his time, this book was probably available, or at least they knew about it. Who knows? When Nebuchadnezzar destroyed everything, some of these things could have been destroyed. But Ezra at least knew about it, and that's where the history was recorded. It's typical that that's what would. That mine or? So it's typical that that's indeed what would happen. So what happens after Jehoshaphat? And so we need to go to verse 35. Let's see what we say here. So verse 35 of chapter 20 says, it's titled The End of Jehoshaphat's Reign. After this, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, joined with Ahaziah, king of Israel, who acted wickedly. He joined with him in building ships to go to Tarshish. And remember this, we kind of went over this a little bit. And they built ships to Ezion Geber. Then Eleazar, the son of Davahu of Mareshah, prophesied against Jehoshaphat, saying, because you have joined Ahaziah, the Lord will destroy what you have made. And the ships were wrecked, and they were not able to go to Tarshish. So anyway, we see different things here. It just points out that although he was a godly man, he made mistakes. He shouldn't have went into an agreement with Ahaziah. Ahaziah was king of Israel during this time period. Now, even in this, you see this is not actually in chronological order. He died. Obviously, there ain't no way he can do this when he dies. So if you ever look at the the book by Crockett that deals with that, it will show this in different time period when it took place with Ahaziah. But it's important that they put this out there. What do you think is important that Scripture, a lot of times, these people that will say that they were godly and did good, probably one of the most prominent is David. Why do you think it records things that they messed up in? And if you look at a book like, you know, some type of mythology, or you look at a book of like, you know, false religion, their heroes are perfect. So why do you think Scripture records these people that were men of faith and women of faith? Why do you think it records their flaws?
We're just like them.
We're just like them. The New Testament says that all these things were written for our learning. And so we're just like them. And why is that good for us to realize we're just like them?
God hadn't changed. We should know that.
Well, God hasn't changed, and so we learn that. We learn His, His acceptance or whatever. But these people were called men of faith. They were called godly people, and yet they had flaws. So, how does that reflect on us? How do we learn or understand that? What does it tend to do for us? The fact that David was called a man after God's own heart, but yet he made some really egregious things that were like, well, I would never do that. But you've done other things. So, how does that help us in our lives today?
Well, we have to study their character, which entails, helps us to realize we all make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
but we got to see what was so special about David's life or other
Mm-hmm.
characters' life was their willingness to repent once they
Okay.
messed up.
It sets an example for us to follow and lets us know what the consequences are.
Well, it does. There was always consequences for sin, even on these people that were our heroes of faith. If Bible was like other documents, and every character that ever lived was presented in Scripture just like Jesus. Okay? Can we, people say, you need to do what Jesus would do. Well, how well do we do that? Sometimes not very well, do we? Uh, but that's not the standard we're actually judged on. We're not judged on if we can be perfect and without sin like Jesus throughout our life. And that's good because none of us could do that. So Jesus is shown as he was without sin so that we knew why he could be that sacrificial lamb. But everybody else was presented. It's not that Jesus had no flaws, but others were presented as they were as well, with warts included. And think about it, if everybody that is praised in the Bible was perfect,
They wouldn't.
they wasn't. That's true. But if they were presented that way, we'd be like, how can we can't live up to that standard. So the fact that these people were praised for being godly and yet they weren't perfect gives us hope in that that's not the standard we have to live to. We're going to not do what God would want us to do sometimes. Hopefully we learn from it and we don't make, the same mistakes often. But yes. Oh, one of them spam type numbers. Uh,
I can feel it buzz.
yeah. But if it'd been Haley, I might have taken it. but or my one daughter that doesn't live at the house song, I would have probably taken it. But so it gives us hope that we can attain and we can see how what made them redeemable. And so that's what we go by. Okay. So now we're going to get into um, what's next in Israel. And so that's a good thing. So it says Jehoshaphat slept with his fathers. Now, we see this a lot. What does it mean when it says he slept with his fathers? Died. He's died and he's buried. Does it mean that we're in a state of sleep when we die? No. It's just a euphemism they would use back in the day because you were at a time of rest in the sense that you no longer did anything on earth. You didn't do works anymore in the sense that we did. Even godly people were in a state of paradise, but it was no longer where you told and worked and everything. So they just called it a state of sleep. And was buried with his fathers in the city of David. That's Jerusalem, as it's referred to here. And Jehoram, his son, reigned in his place. So remember, there was a Jehoram or similar name in Israel. This is a different Jehoram. He had brothers, the sons of Jehoshaphat, Azariah, Jehiel, Hal, Zechariah, Azariah, Michael, and Shephatiah. All these were sons of Jehoshaphat, the king of Israel. Their father gave them great gifts of silver, gold, and valuable possessions, together with fortified cities of Judah. But he gave the kingdom to Jehoram because he was the firstborn. Now, that's similar. Now, Jehoshaphat had reigned a good long time. He lived to a decent age for that time. And so you would expect that he would indeed be generous to his heirs. But as is tradition, the eldest was the one that received the most. That was very typical back in that day. And even in lines of ascension in kingdoms today, it is the oldest that has the hierarchy. It's the standard that's always been used. You would hope the oldest would be the wisest, but that's not always the case, is it? So in verse 4, it says, when Jehoram had ascended to the throne of his father and was established. We don't know how long that was, but when everybody was used to him being the king, well, he killed all his brothers. Don't have to worry about people fighting with you and bickering with you. And I'm sure He killed them and says with a sword, and also some of the princes of Israel. So he got rid of any kind of conflict with. Now, do you think God is pleased with behavior like this? Well, of course not. My guess, he took all that gold and silver they had, and so he now had it all. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. That's not a very long time, is it? So typically, the kings that do despicable behavior, it kind of comes back on them. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel as the house of Ahab had done. Now, so is that a good thing or a bad thing? When you walk in the ways of the kings of Israel as opposed to the kings of Judah. That's not a compliment, is it? Now, they were all sinful. There was not a good king at all in Israel, and Ahab was pretty despicable. If you remember, we spent quite a bit of time on him. For the daughter of Ahab was his wife. So, see, there's a connection there. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Okay. Yet the Lord was not willing to destroy the house of David because of the covenant that he had made with David, and since he had promised to give a lamp to him and to his sons forever. So, although he is evil and did all kinds of evil things, God wasn't going to destroy the kingdom. He wasn't going to end the genealogy like he'd done with some of the kings of Israel, Ahab being one of them. Instead, because of the promise he made to David, that line would still be preserved. So it's good only because of David did this keep going. Okay, let's get to verse 8. It says, in his days, Edom. Now, who is Edom? I always like to point this out because we need to realize who Edom is. Who was Edom? And who was the founder of the Edomites? Name means red. The person that was the start of the Edomites, he was red and hairy. Esau, firstborn son of Isaac. Yes, Esau. Remember, Jacob got the birthright, renamed Israel, but Esau still inherited, he still had a wealth of a kingdom and quite a bit of, he had a prosperous genealogy, and they became known as Edomite. Now, in the New Testament, this name gets slightly altered as languages change to Idumea. And Idumea is still around in the New Testament, and that is where Herod the Great and all the Herods came from. So Herod the Great was not a Jew. He was not an Israelite, but he was somewhat related in that he was of the descendants of Esau. So he would have known a lot. If you look at, in fact, you can look at a lot of these maps. So look at the 12 tribes, my map 4, the 12 tribes in Israel. Go back to the back. It's just good to know where these tribes are. So this is the tribes. So at this time, Esau had been his people had just been down there, going about. And, but you see Edom. Now, this is when the tribes were first going to the promised land. You see where Edom is? Everybody see where Edom is?
Sure if I'm on the right map.
It's just the 12 tribes in Canaan. What's your map title?
Map what? One or
Exodus.
two?
Well, your maps are different. Whatever he has, it's going to be the same, huh?
Exodus and Conquest of Canaan.
It might be that.
12
Yeah.
tribes of-
Yeah, there it is. There it is. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And so if you look just to the southeast of the Dead Sea, you should see in capital letters Edom. Well, I think he was on the map.
I'm on map 1.
Oh, well, keep going. What map is it, Dale?
Map 5.
Map 5 on your maps. Yeah. Map 5. Yeah. Okay. Everybody found Edom now? It's to the southeast of the Dead Sea,
Down at the bottom of the page.
down the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
You found it, Edom?
Back
Get
this
close. There you go. Edom. So that is where the descendants of Esau lived and progressed. Now, you notice at the very top, south of the Dead Sea, which would have been in Edom, is a town called Zoar. What do you remember about Zoar? Anything?
What do they call that Dead Sea? They can't get either
Nothing
way.
grows in it. It's so salty. So the Dead Sea is one of the lowest places on earth. It is like almost 800 feet below sea level.
Full of all kinds of.
So as the water runs, all this water runs to it, the salt, you get all these minerals and salt that accumulate on it, just like an ocean. Except it's not an ocean because it has nowhere for this water to go. So it is much saltier than the ocean. I mean, a lot saltier. In fact, you'll see people that go to the Dead Sea, and you don't have to. Even if you can't float anywhere else, you can float in the Dead Sea. It's so thick, so nothing lives in it. No fish, anything like
We
that.
got
Can live.
Salt Lake over here. United
It's
States.
similar, but not as salty. It has a lot of minerals from the mountains that run down to it, but this is so low. It is the lowest place on Earth that's not sea, not ocean, and so it is so far below sea level that everything runs to it. But the thing is, by everything running to it, of course, it's kind of a desert area. You get all the minerals and deposits that accumulate in it, and so it's called the Dead Sea or Salt Sea. I think at some point it was called that because it's just a big body of water where nothing lives. But one time it did. Now you got Zoar. Do you remember what it was close to? Well, I'll give you a hint. So Lot and his $2, they moved to a cave near Zoar, and that's where they began their new time period. So what was it close to? Where did Lot come from? It was destroyed. You won't find it on the map.
You got to see a Galilee here too.
Yeah, that's way on up.
Yeah.
But where was Zoar close to? Occasionally you have a map that says this may have been where it's at. Remember 2 towns called Sodom and Gomorrah? So they were close to Zoar. Where are they at now? Well, they're under the Dead Sea now, somewhere. And they think they know about where they were, but anyway, they're under the water. They're underwater now. So that's just the way it is. Now, if you go on to other maps, so you see where Edom is. You go to Kingdom of David and Solomon. That's my next map. I don't know if it's y'all's next map, but
I got it here.
okay. You'll see Edom kind of encircled by the extent of Solomon's kingdom, and they were kind of a they were subservient to Israel during that time period. Then you go to the divided kingdom, and they broke away again. If you remember, we even talked about that when it happened. But you'll see Edom there, back, kind of back about where it was. And, it was under conflict there. You keep going to, Let's see. Let's find a map that actually shows it right. Of course, people migrate slightly. You see the Palestine at the time of our Savior, Idumea is the descendants of the people of Edom, and you can see where it's at. It's slightly different, but that was because we read about places and we read about them with the geography and the climate, and we think in our minds it's like it is today, but climates change. This business of, people say we got climate change going on. Well, yes, we do. I mean, it's called weather, and it's always been changing. So the place where Idumea was, if you remember where Zoar and all that was, Sodom and Gomorrah. Why did Lot choose Sodom and Gomorrah? Rich, fertile land to it's crops and farm and everything. Well, you know what's there now? It's desert. Well, it's just desert. I mean, some of it's mountainous, but it's desert. So by the time of the first century, that had become more desert. You see, there's really no cities or towns there on this map, and so they had to migrate slightly because they followed where it was. But the Idumeans are the Edomites, and they're no longer a people in that sense. And so, but anyway, they probably were assimilated with a lot of Arab population and a lot of Jewish population. It's just the way it is.
Back there in the 50s, we used to have water in the creeks and stuff like that. Nowadays, you don't have it unless it rains and it don't last very long.
Well, it depends on what kind of creek it is. If it's a creek based on watershed, you're right, because we consume more water than what we did back in the day. If you're talking about a spring-fed creek, it's probably about the same. But we do consume more water, and so now I will say this: creek behavior has changed. If you look at not just a thing called hydrology, so you've got more pavement, you got more roofs and other things. So that water, so for your small bodies like your small creeks and streams, they are more prone now to flash floods. And so they'll have a lot of water during rain events, but it's flowing fast and it goes through. Your rivers, your big rivers, they don't really. So like Arkansas River, it can rain for a month solid, and yet the crest elevation for the river will be probably about a week or two after all the rain stops, because it takes a while for all that watershed to build up. But your creeks, they're the ones that have the flash flooding. And your rivers, they have the big floods. But so it has to do with how much water we consume compared to used to, and it has to do with the fact that the water moving to the creeks are going much faster than they used to, so it dries up quicker. So it gets through there and dries up quicker. But in general, rainfall is about the same as it's been. It gradually, some years more, some years less, and it kind of always does that. Long-term trends are the ones that can change an area. So, one time California wasn't quite as arid as it is now, and there was more bodies of water. And of course, as they consume water, a lot of factors go in there. They have. So somebody in the West thought it was a good idea, and water rights in the West are different than they are in the East. So in the West, most places historically didn't pay by how much you consumed. So like, your water bill is based on how much you consume. Now they got different rates. If you don't consume a lot, there's a minimum cost you have to pay. But, basically if you consumed a lot, you'll pay more than if you consumed a little. Out West, because a lot of it is semi-arid, they didn't do it that way. They had the Colorado River and some other things. They said, hey, we've got the piping. Everybody just pays a flat fee. So whether you were had a huge property where you say agriculture property where you had to irrigate constant to keep your crops going, or you're just a simple residential guy that used minimum amount of water, you paid the same amount most places out West. And then they said, well, this green stuff's nice. We're going to require you have to have an irrigation system for your yard so your yard don't dry up and die. And so that's what they did. Now, a lot of the smart people, they started doing landscaping that didn't need a lot of water, and they'd have just a little patch of grass. There's a minimum standard. So you'll see a lot of the yards and, some of the places, and they'll have little bitty grass areas, but that area has to have irrigation, and then they have others. So none of California hardly should be green. It should all be, except for the northern part, it should all be desert
California
looking.
ain't nothing but desert.
It should be desert, but you go there, it don't look like desert. Now the hardcore desert it is, but you go to like places like Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego, yeah, it's nice and lush and everything, but it's only that way because they irrigate
Damn
everything.
sand.
Yeah, they irrigate everything. And you have to, when it's sandy, you have to irrigate a lot because the water goes right through. So you got to water it more than you would if you had some clay and some other type things somewhere at the bottom. But anyway, we kind of got a little off track, but things do change is the point. So Idumea is the same people as the Edomites, but they had to migrate slightly because where they were became desert, but it wasn't desert. And so, how does the Bible describe the land of Canaan? We even had that on Sunday talking about Moses, that they'd be going to a land what?
flowing with milk and honey.
Okay.
Milk and honey.
Have you seen pictures of modern day Israel? Modern day Israel is a lot of desert. So, how in the world would God describe a place flowing with milk and honey when most of it's desert now? What's the difference?
Several years.
Yeah, a few thousand years will do that. And so the climate is different now than it was back then. And so it was lush back then. It's not lush now. Now, there are some pockets that are more lush. And, the technology they use for a fairly small country, land area wise and population wise, they have created a lot of technology that is in the fields of medicine and other things. But also, what they do, they don't have a shortage on water, even though they live in a desert area. And they have revolutionized desalination in a way that is beyond anybody else. And so they take it from the Mediterranean Sea and they pipe it in and they through these desalination tanks, and they've got all the water they could ever use. It's expensive on the front end, but then you've got all the water you ever need. And there's a process to do that. They have a few in, like San Diego has one. I think there's one north of Los Angeles. But every time it comes up for a vote, so, California is all messed up. Everything. So California has close to what you would call a true democracy. So if they want to do something, they get a proposition up and then it's just a strict, majority vote. Sounds great, but that's how they've got all this weird things now because, the population goes, is it a good idea? Well, hey, sounds good to me. And so, that's what they do. And so the majority think that's what they do. Well, sometimes it's good to have a representative that kind of can dig into the issues more and say, well, this is a good idea because, or this is a bad idea. And it's not just just operating, what sounds good and you just voting on it. And that's where California's at. So every time a new desalination tank comes up, these environmentalists say, well, I don't think it'd be good for us. It could cause this, that, they always, worst case scenario, and they're always wrong, it seems like. They used to say the pipeline in Alaska would be bad for the wildlife, and the wildlife loves it because it gives them some warmth and places to, and so all these things they worried it would dwindle down because of that, they have flourished since the pipeline's been built. And so they will not vote for a desalination tank, even though they have these droughts, they have trouble even having water when they have fires, they have all these issues, but because the way their laws are made, you can't just change them like that. You have to put up to a vote. Well, this is going to cost us X dollars more. I don't want it. It might hurt the environment, And so it's a strange place because of that. And I don't know if it'll change in our lifetime or not. But anyway, so things do change. So I wanted to point that out because uh, a lot of times we think of places we like, oh, this is the way it looks now. Now there are places like around the Sea of Galilee, it is still pretty lush. And so if you see modern pictures of the Sea of Galilee, it looks nice. So when you see, you know, Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, it was a little hillside and you could see the sea below it. It's beautiful. Of course, the Sea of Galilee is basically a lake. It's not a sea. But, and so, that looks very similar to when Jesus was around. But if you look at Jerusalem, everything's sandy, dusty, you know, not that's not the way it looked in Jesus' time. It was more lush, more green. Uh, so things do change. You've seen places that look totally different. Say a place where they used to mine, that it may look awful now, because especially if they mined it a long time ago, they didn't really take care of things as well, or anything like that. So someone come to the U.S. Uh, from 1776 and all of a sudden came here, not only would it be just like this would all look weird, but even the train would look different. Uh, uh, you know, I've seen pictures like in the Atlanta area. They used to take pictures with a balloon type thing, and they'd get above and they'd take pictures of the area. And you see pictures of the Atlanta area in the early 1800s, uh, and yet you see pictures of Atlanta now, and the biggest difference is it has a whole lot more trees now than it did back in the early 1800s, which seems weird. Doesn't seem like that'd be the case, but we do. So it's kind of a weird thing, just things change. So, uh, which is good, but it can be bad, I guess. So anyway, it says in his days Edom revolted, and Uh, then Joram passed over with his commanders and all his chariots, and he rose by night and struck the Edomites who had surrounded him and his chariot commanders. Uh, so Edom revolted from the rule of Judah to this day. At that time, Libnah also revolted from his rule. We've read this before, but putting it in order now with Jehoram, because he had forsaken the Lord, the God of his fathers. Moreover, he made high places in the hill country of Judah and led inhabitants of Jerusalem into whoredom and made Judah go astray. Now, the word whoredom there, it's not referring to men and women. What is it referring to? And this is another principle in the Old Testament. A lot of times it will use these words because people could relate to it. So when you deal with something like a word whoredom, it means someone's unfaithful. So generally we think of it as a wife being unfaithful, a husband being unfaithful, and having a lot of illicit affairs with whoever.
Spiritual adultery.
Yes. So who is that straying from?
Straying from God.
God, yes. So
Idols.
the whoredom it's talking about is they started worshiping idols in the high places and they went astray from God. So I like to point things like that so when we read it we can kind of understand it, and a lot of times I think sometimes we assume too much. We assume, well, everybody knows what that's talking about, but I don't know how you're supposed to know what you're talking about unless you have either been told or studied it yourself. Um, Well, like I say, we are going back, and if you didn't think so, you will see it now. Um, we're told, uh, and a letter came from him to him from Elijah the prophet. So this shows you how far back we've went. Thus says the Lord, the God of David your father, because you have not walked in the ways of Jehoshaphat your father, or in the ways of Asa king of Judah, which would have been his grandfather, but have walked in the way of the kings of Israel, and have enticed Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem into whoredom, as the house of Ahab led Israel into whoredom. And also you have killed your brothers of your father's house who were better than you. Behold, the Lord will bring great plague on your people, your children, your wives, and all your possessions. So he gets this letter from Elisha, and basically things are not going to be good. And you yourself will have a severe, clicked off of it. Let's do this. And you yourself will bring great plague on your people and your children, your wives, and your possession. And you yourselves will have a severe sickness with a disease of your bowels until your bowels come out because the disease day by day. Now, that doesn't sound like a very pleasant way to go, does it? So it says then but it came from Elijah. Now Elijah, where did Elijah live during this time period? Did he live in the north Israel or the south Judah? He was no, he was a prophet of the northern kingdom. Remember, he had Ahab and all this and everything. But as a well-known man of God, the prophet, powerful prophet, he sends this letter to Jehoram and tells him what's going to happen to him. Well, now, when you've got somebody that really isn't a godly and a believer, you know, I'm sure he took that a little bit grain of salt. So verse 16 says, the Lord stirred up against Jehoram the anger of the Philistines and of the Arabians who were near the Ethiopian. I don't know if the map shows this all that well or not, but the Philistines, they were, let's see which map might show this. Divided kingdom, I guess, is the best one. So if you look at your map, Philistia was right along the Mediterranean Sea. And you had, the towns such as Gaza, Ascalon, Ashdod, Joppa, and you had these. You had Gath in there. Remember, we haven't really read much about them since really since David. David had some battles with them and kind of took them over, but and they were real small under David and Solomon's reign. But they grow a little bit during this time, and so he raised. It says anger of the Philistines, the Arabians, who are near the Ethiopians. So let's see if we've got a map that kind of shows that. We're not going to have a map that shows all the way down to Ethiopia, I don't think. Okay, I know where it's at. Okay, so I'm on the growth of the Christian community, first and second centuries. It's one of the last maps. It's my map number 13.
13?
Yeah. Okay, so we saw where Philistia was. It was right along the Mediterranean Sea in the southern part of Israel, and it says he rose up the Arabians from near Ethiopia. Okay, so the Arabian desert, by the way, where this Bible says Arabian desert, what country is that today? It's still got that, take out the N, it's still got that part in the name of it. That's where Saudi Arabia is. Okay. Now, this predates by, probably more than 1,000 years, Muhammad. and Islam. But there were Arabs well before then. Muhammad was an Arab, obviously. And so Arabs would have had to descended most likely in some form fashion from Abraham, and so they probably have that right. But Saudi Arabia is in this desert area. Now, I think we've got a few that may have been in Saudi Arabia. Uh, in fact, where is it that Dwight doesn't he go to Saudi Arabia from time to time?
Um, I don't know
I
for
think
sure.
that is where he goes. I think that's where he works from time to time. He'll work there for a few months and come home. But so Saudi Arabia, what is the climate like? By the way, it was the same back then. So what is the climate like in Saudi Arabia?
Hot,
Hot,
dry.
dry. It's desert. It's when you say desert, it would be the epitome of what you think. Just the sand dunes, the camels, that have to because not a lot of water there. And so Saudi Arabia, the southern part of it. So you see this Red Sea. So that's where they crossed over into. Uh, but the Red Sea. By the way, that little thing that juts out, Mount Sinai would be about where the two bodies kind of split there. Uh, Sinai and Horeb is right in there. Uh, so Red Sea, if you go all the way down to, the Red Sea eventually spills out into an ocean. Okay. And when it does, right about there, you've got, of course, you get into Africa and you've got Ethiopia and I forget what the other one was called, but that's where likely somewhere in that region was where um, Queen of Sheba was from. Okay, so it's in what would be Saudi Arabia. It's not quite there, but it was from the southern part of this, and they rose up to battle along with the Philistines to come against them. Says, and they came up back in verse 17. And they came up against Judah, invaded it, and carried away all the possessions they found that belonged to the king's house, and also his sons and his wives, so that no son was left except Jehoahaz, his youngest son. And after all this, the Lord struck him in his bowels and grieved with an incurable disease. Says then, in the course of time, at the end of 2 years, that was a painful death. I mean, 2 years of this. His bowels came out because of the disease, and he died in great agony. His people made no fire in his honor, like the fires made for his fathers. He was 32 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned about 8 years in Jerusalem, and he departed with no one's regret. They buried him in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the king. So, was this a well-liked man? No. That to me is one of the worst things could be said about you. You died, especially someone that was a prominent person who was king. You died. No one regretted it. That's how despicable and unlike an individual he actually was. So, what do you think about what uh, we've learned about uh, Jehoram? And in it, really, we studied about Jehoshaphat too. So, what a contrast! Jehoshaphat wasn't perfect, but he was a godly man, and God respected him, and he was buried with the tombs of the kings, just like David and others, and people loved him. And he set his kids up like you would think a good, honest man would do. And then Jehoram, Elijah. I like what Elijah said about him. He was the worst of the sons. So uh, if Jehoshaphat did something wrong, he shouldn't have put him as king. But anyway, he was just not a well liked man. God didn't regard him. And so next week, we'll get into uh, uh, Ahaziah as he begins his reign. Mhm. And so we'll go from there. Um, so Ahaziah, we'll see if he does better than Jehoram. Can't do much worse, can you? You lose land, you lose battles, you lose a lot of your wealth, and then you have a disease because what you did, and you die horribly after 2 years. Uh, and they don't regard you. They did bury you, but they didn't regard you, and probably my guess is you'll never find his where he was buried at. Any thoughts as we get ready to shut this down? And next week, I'm going to try to have some handouts as well, but hopefully you enjoyed this. Do you like how we go back to the map so and just kind of picture and visualize where these places are? I think it helps because, these are real countries, these are real people. In fact, much of it still exists today, and we can actually pinpoint where these are, where these people went to. It just helps when we're thinking about the way these things are. One of the things I think a lot of people don't realize about Israel is it's not much different than here, except it's got a big body of water, the Mediterranean Sea, next to it. But it is very hilly and mountainous. Now, not huge mountains, but mountains like we got here with, Magazine, all the Ouachitas and the Ozarks. It's like that type thing. You got a river running through it. So when you visualize it, you need to understand that it's not flat land. And a lot of times, you'll see pictures of places and you'll think of it, oh, that's a fairly flat place. It wasn't flat. And so another thing you might think of, these people. So they have nice cars, to get around to go from place to place. No, most of them didn't even have a chariot.
Camel power.
So how did they? Well, yeah, they present, but how did like Jesus? How did he get around? Walked,
Walk or donkey.
walked. Well, the donkeys were generally reserved for the women and other things, but they weren't really very fast. So basically, most people walk. Now, it's not flat land walking. It's up these hills and mountains, up and down, crossing creeks and rivers, up and down. It'd be like walking, from here to Mount Magazine. I mean, um, at some point it gets a little hilly on you. Or walking to Larry's house by foot. You go up some hills here and there, and take away all the bridges. That would have been a fun thing to cross rivers and creeks. And that's what life was like back then. So it puts it in more perspective. So when these people say they went from here to here, that was a journey. That was something you didn't